Hello everyone, thank you all so much for joining in. This is Dylan from the Trini Gardener channel, and I'm super excited for this video because we're in one of my favorite places in the garden, in my small backyard garden, which is the pumpkin patch. And it's a place that I can go to anytime I'm feeling stressed or anytime there's work that I don't want to do, and just relax and just take it all in. Now, pumpkin is one of the most nutritional crops you could ever grow in a garden. One of the reasons why people shy away from growing pumpkin is because, as you all can see here, everything that you see is one pumpkin that I grew from one tiny little seed. So for the tiny home garden, it might not be the best fit unless that's all you want to grow. If you want to grow just pumpkin alone, by all means, fill your backyard or whatever space you have with pumpkin. If you plan to have other crops, the first thing to remember is that pumpkin is not the nicest neighbor. So you're going to want to have it somewhere where it can have, I mean, these numbers are going to sound kind of crazy, but a minimum of 20 by 20 square feet where you can dedicate to just one pumpkin plant. If you want to have two pumpkin plants and have them vine together, then that's entirely up to you. But it does require quite a bit of space. Now, when you are choosing a location for where you're going to be planting your pumpkin plant, you want to choose an area that's going to have the most amount of exposure to sunlight because it is a sun-loving crop. It is a summer crop for those of you who live in a temperate country. You do not want to plant this somewhere that gets less than 5 hours of sunlight. It's not going to do very well. It wants to have as much sunlight as possible, which is the reason for these massive, huge, broad leaves to capture all of that sunlight. Because if you can think about it, that fruit is not like a tomato or a pepper. It's a massive fruit that you're going to be producing. That requires a huge amount of energy, and that energy comes from the sun. So do not rob your pumpkin of any sunlight. As much as possible, put it somewhere where you can get full sunlight from morning till afternoon.
Now, I like to plant my pumpkins from seedlings rather than planting directly with a seed in the ground. But in agri shops, you don't always get seedlings to buy. So these are some seeds that I started in my seed trays about maybe 7 to 10 days ago. And then I just pot up those seedlings, those baby seedlings, because I don't like to plant it too young. Right, I'll teach you all how to make your own seed starting mix and potting mix in future videos, so don't worry about it. So I'll just leave it in this container now for another week to 2 weeks and just let the root system start to develop, let the stem start to strengthen up. So when I do eventually put it in the ground, it'll be a lot stronger, more resilient plant that's ready to go.
And after just 10 days, this is the size of the seedling. It grows so quickly, pumpkin does. So we're going to be planting this in. This is just a demonstration. Not actually going to leave this pumpkin plant here, but I am going to show you how I would plant it if I were planting this pumpkin plant here. So the first thing, I'll move away some of this mulch. Right, and then I'll have to dig a pretty sizable hole for this big pumpkin plant. Now, some people do plant their pumpkins in like a mound, a big mound of dirt, but that is not absolutely necessary because pumpkins will, as they vine, spring new roots along the vines. So the mound itself is probably only necessary if you're planting more than one plant at the same time. Okay, so look at the root structure, right? You can see it's growing pretty healthily, right? I'm just gonna rest this in there, right? Now, normally I would be putting in some worm castings and some organic fertilizer into this pumpkin here if I wasn't sure of the soil. But this soil is really rich, well amended soil that is full of compost, nutrients, and just a lot of other beneficial components. So you don't actually, I'm not actually like in need of any further nutrients for this here. So I will probably just give this some worm tea, right, or some compost tea, maybe every 2 weeks. But apart from that, there's no more fertilization to happen on this pumpkin. So that's how easy it is to plant in your pumpkin plant. And when it comes to watering your pumpkin, you want to water your pumpkin at least 2 to 3 times a week. All right, so that's quite a bit of water. Now, don't go and water your pumpkin every single day unless for some reason your soil just is terrible at retaining water, which should not be the case because, as I always talk about, you need to have soil that has good amounts of organic matter in it through our compost that will help retain the moisture. But if you don't have good water retention, then you probably will need to water your pumpkin once a day, which is not really recommended. For instance, this pumpkin here, believe it or not, I never water this pumpkin because we get rain right now we're getting rain at least one time a week. With that amount of rain and the fact that we have enough organic matter in the soil here, I don't need to water my pumpkin any more than that. Even sometimes I'll see the leaves sort of droopy, and that's just from the sort of that really strong sun that can make in the the middle part of the day, 12, 1 p.m. That the leaves will sort of be droopy. But that doesn't mean I need to go and water it any more than what nature is doing for me right now. That's more than sufficient for your pumpkin plant. Now, if you are not getting any rain at all, then go ahead and water your plant maybe 2 to 3 times a week, right? That's safe. Probably no more than that, unless, as I said, you know that your soil is probably really sandy, loamy soil, and then maybe it doesn't retain water as much as possible. But don't go and overwater your pumpkin. And as well, if you can avoid it, do not plant your pumpkin somewhere that floods, somewhere that is going to get water pooling up and without the ability to drain out in time, without the necessary drains, because pumpkin is, because of the nature of pumpkin and it being a water loving um, crop, the pumpkin will actually produce in a way that has almost no taste because it'll suck up all of that water, and too much of water is, it's just going to have too much water content. And if you've ever had pumpkin that has been through flood, sort of like what happens to watermelon in flood, it's really not a good tasting crop that you're going to end up getting or end up having to sell, and you'll probably get really poor prices for that. Okay, so just be aware that with pumpkin, as much as you want to make sure it has enough water, that you do not want it to be overwatered or somewhere where it gets waterlogged, because not just the worry of root rot, which can and definitely will happen to your pumpkin if it is underwater for too much of time, but the water itself can affect the way the fruit itself grows, and that's something that we want to avoid, which is why it's very important to have that nice even complete soil with enough organic matter through your compost to be able to retain water but also drain out water, and not having something like clay, which tends to hold on to too much of water, or something like too much sandy soil, which will drain out too much of water. And lastly, when it comes to fertilizing your pumpkin plant, remember that you can use your normal organic fertilizers at the point of planting. You put some worm castings in, you put maybe some biotone to make sure you have that nice mycorrhizal relationship being encouraged in the soil itself. And that is all the fertilizer I have used on this pumpkin patch here. Now, if you want to take it a step further, you can use your organic nitrogen fertilizer at the very beginning stages, maybe for the first 2 months, while the plant is vining and establishing itself, right? And then when the plant has pretty much reached adulthood, then you can start using something that's a bit higher in the phosphorus and in the potassium to encourage the fruit set, okay? It's not as necessary as you may think, and please don't go ahead and use those chemicals and organic fertilizers. It's really not necessary if you are a home gardener. Now, if you're doing this on a commercial scale, then by all means do what you have to do for your farm and for your livelihood. Of course, no problem at all. But for the home gardener, you really don't have to take this route at all with the chemical fertilizers. Just use the organics and you're going to be more than fine. And that's how simple it is to grow your own pumpkin right at home. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, but more importantly, I hope that you learned something from this video. I really hope that it'll encourage you to, get out there and grow your own pumpkin. Pumpkin right now is quite expensive as a crop, which wasn't the case, I don't think, about 12 months ago. Now it's, it's a fairly good cash crop. If you're planning to grow this commercially. So, have a go at it, try it out, see how it does, see if you have the space for it, and, send me the pictures on Instagram, on TikTok. Let me see what's going on in your garden. I'm so happy to see what's going on in your gardens. It really encourages us, and it makes us so happy to know that the work that we're doing in these videos, it's benefiting you. Remember, if you know someone could benefit from this information, then share this video with them to help them grow more food for themselves and their family. Once again, this has been Dylan with the Trini Gardener channel, reminding you to get up and get growing. Take care.